We've actually had a number of conversations in the past few weeks with different VFX studios, people who are using this in film, and starting to kind of get an idea of some of the challenges that are faced. Today, we're just going to kind of talk through a couple of different ways that we've heard people using it, some of the problems and challenges that they want to address with the tools, and we'll go through a couple of use cases and kind of talk through that, how we have kind of built the tool to solve some of those problems, and then really some of the ways that you can creatively composite this after the fact. So we are looking at a green screen image that I pulled off of the web on an example website of different like green screen plates. So we're looking at one here. The real intent is just to give an example of what you might get. I think this is probably not the best example, but it's a good enough example for us to work with. But one of the challenges that you'll find yourself facing as a VFX compositor is you're going to be taking something like this, a plate that you are trying to generate a background for. And historically, you've had to have like a whole host of either resources like stock images or CGI in order to create that scenery. But now we have, generative AI. And I think a lot of the compositors in the industry are playing around with Stable Diffusion and the kind of controllable tools that we have in this ecosystem, because it gives you the ability to do a lot of things with tools like ControlNet and IP Adapter for really matching the style that you're going for, as well as, really creating the right composition, the right, perspectives and angles. And so we'll talk a little bit about just the ways that you can get those compositions produced in a way that's useful for you in this type of production. And we'll also talk about just a couple of other mixtures between ControlNet and IP Adapter to get the right vibe and the right style of imagery that you're going for. So we are going to start with this image here that we've got this gentleman, this Viking gentleman perhaps, who is standing in front of a green screen. And if we are, another question, app is mini-ized? No. Appmin. What am I seeing here? What am I missing? Stream pause. Swap to your application, so. Okay, I think there's an error. One sec. I haven't minimized it, but something is going on here. Technical difficulty, bear with me. We're going to start the restream. Can we see that now? It's all good now. Thumbs up. All right, tell me if it pauses again. We'll go restart it. Okay, cool. So we're looking at this gentleman, he's Viking. The thing that you're going to want in this type of composition is you're going to want to be able to create a background that fits with the shot that you've made. So in this case, we're a little bit further away. We see a lot more of the ground itself. It kind of goes off into the background, assuming we want this kind of like, background, whether it's a building, whether it's kind of like scenery. There's a whole host of things that we might want to see. The important part here is that if we're creating an image that's going to fit underneath this on the green screen, we actually, don't want this character in it. So using a depth map of this would be a little bit messy. Not only would we have all this stuff on the side, but it would actually pick up the back wall as part of the depth map. And that would kind of give a little bit of, I would say, undesirable influence on our images. But ultimately what you want to do is you want to kind of imagine what would the structure of this shot look like? What's the right angle? What are the right perspective, so that I can actually create the thing that will fit on the green screen behind it, right? And so in this case, I did a pretty simple ground with the perspective that we've got here. I took this into Blender. I kind of used it as a reference image. I blew out kind of a base floor that went off into the distance, right? And you can see a little bit of that here and where it would fit. If we do kind of a hover here, you can see where that background fits. Might even be a little bit high there. Might, in an ideal world, have brought that down a little bit to more around this level here so that it's like really flat, but you generally get the idea. we're going to create kind of a rough in render of what that background perspective ought to be. How can we get that type of perspective? Now, there are a bunch of different ways to do this. The most important part is that you've got a relatively decent base that is going to guide the perspective of the shot that you're about to produce, because that's what's going to go underneath on the green screen. But ultimately, I think the thing you're trying to do is give enough flexibility as well by not having too much in it. So if you wanted a building in the background, if you wanted a specific structure, you could certainly add that into the render and have kind of it blocked out. But you don't want to add too much unless you're really going for high degrees of control and you actually want to create like an exact replica of the shot that you're going for. If you're leaning on the model to create the content, that's going to be the important piece here. So we are going to take this into our control layers. We will add a control adapter and bring in this piece here and go to our depth control net. So our depth control net, you can kind of see how that's influenced. The depth map has accurately pictured this as foreground going off into the background with a black kind of like, empty spot. So that's going to give us a nice like generic, everywhere there's black, it will give us a little bit more freedom. It'll kind of bias towards the prompt in a lot of ways. And then we can kind of compare and see how that fits our character. So let's see here. We are going to see, maybe we got a prompt I can copy in here. Yeah, so we'll just try we'll try something. Does anyone have any ideas of where this Viking guy is? We can play around with it. I always like to give myself curveballs and not completely prepare for this, because that way it's more fun. A beach shore. Okay. A beach shore, ocean in the distance, empty. Now I'm gonna give you some reasons why the beach shore is gonna be a little bit hard. Dunes. Okay, somebody said dunes. Ocean in the distance. I don't really know that this is the right like format for dunes, because it's kind of flat, but we'll see. We'll see what it comes up with. I'm gonna loosen the weight here, just to give it a little bit more freedom, and I'll also maybe make that taper off again at about 70%. And again, this is because once we've got that core perspective in, once we've kind of like imbued the image with this is the perspective of the shot, the rest of it after about that 40% mark on the denoising process, that's really just kind of fleshing it out. You've got this big structural step of the process, which is early on in the denoising loop. You're kind of like figuring out where things are, mass shapes. You're kind of getting the big blobs down, the big brush strokes. And that ends at about 30 to 40% of the way through. You can still get some major differences, but generally structurally, it's going to be kind of baked at that point. And so you can really decide where you want this to end. Maybe we'll even do a couple of examples. We'll do one at 70%. I'll fix the seed so that we can just do some A/B testing here. So we'll do one at 70%, and then I will do one at maybe 40%. And also I realized I have a typo in my, typo in my prompt of beach short. I don't know what that's going to be. Also made it black and white, so maybe that's something we don't want. Black and white. So yeah, you can see that even with the beginning and end step down to 40%, we really didn't lose a lot of the structure, right? The structure is pretty baked at that point. And we've even got some nice footsteps here that might overlap with where our gentleman is. Let's see, which one do I like better? I think this one maybe has more depth in it and kind of looks a little bit closer to what I'm going for. And I think that's the one with a lower end step, right? So again, somebody's asking about the slider. You do have the slider. It is useful. Let's maybe talk about that for a second. When you're doing comparisons, when you're doing befores and afters, when you're doing upscales, all you need to do is either right-click and hit select for compare. That will open up the menu to start comparing against. Or you can use the Alt hotkey, so Alt and click an image, and that will be what selects the comparison image. So if I Alt-click that second one there, we actually have brought open that comparison slider. We can actually compare those images. If I had multiple images, I can either left-click to change my left side image or Alt-click to change my right side image, and that will kind of like change what I'm viewing. You also have a side-by-side to view those images side-by-side, and a hover mode where when you hover, it changes the image in the background. So both of those, or all three of those, are useful tools in different contexts. But the slider is particularly useful and fun to play with. It's interactive. So in this case, I like this one that has a pretty low step. What I'm going to do is generate one at 40% with our correction of shore, and we'll also maybe add in some like color. How do we add some color? Vibrant. Good word. All right, vibrant. We have black and white in the negative prompt, and we are going to do one at 40% in step. And then we're going to take this down really low to like 5% or 10%, get kind of crazy here and see what that does. What I anticipate is that we'll see some pretty big shifts in that range from 10 to 30% where it's going through the denoising loop, where we might lose the structure entirely. But it's also possible we've kind of done enough in that one step that we get a good perspective. Oh, look at that. So when we have our at 40%, and if we want to look at our asset here, at 40%, you can see exactly where the horizon is controlled by the depth map, right? So you can see exactly where that horizon is really shaping itself, and you get that real flat floor. Even at 40%, you've got a lot of that structure that's imposed. When we get down to that one, when we get down to our 10%, the horizon has flexed a little bit. We've got some depth over here on the right. The dunes are popping out. The dunes are popping out over here. The angle of the floor is a little different. You can kind of see a gradual slope down, and then it kind of goes off into the distance. And so this is still useful, right? We can get broad stroke structural stuff controlled this way, and you can use a lot of different things to guide this type of structure. You can use depth, you can use a scribble, you can use anything, right? If you're impacting these early steps and really just influencing that alone, what you're kind of doing is you're nudging the generation to kind of have some more weight and mass in those areas, but then you're letting it go really, really early on to kind of explore the prompt and flesh itself out from there. And so you're kind of giving more time for it to evolve on its own. If we look at, where this guy is, that still might work. Click the wrong one. So we'll alt click this. Let's click this guy. So on our flat floor, probably debate whether he's far enough away from the camera or like the positioning on that, but you kind of see where he'd sit, right? You can probably see that this is a more like aligned structure on the floor. The perspective's a little bit more aligned. We'll probably debate a little bit about whether the perspective on this is right. I think, again, the floor being a little bit lower on the render would probably help out. But this is just a useful tool for really guiding the overall structure of this. Now, if we really wanted to get fun and play around with this, maybe we could send this to the unified canvas. And what I'm going to do is maybe give myself some reference lines on this image. So I'm going to just give myself some lines over here to work with. Look right. I think that looks right. All right. And then I'm going to come back over to my image itself using the Shift hotkey here to get pixel perfect accuracy because I don't want to really go out. And I'm still in that bottom spot. Oh, you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this black anyway, so it's fine. So now I've got some reference lines that I can use just to kind of guide my sketch here. And what I'm going to do is maybe do a rough sketch of, say like a village in the background. Got that. Maybe do like a little fire pit over here. One of these days, I'm going to get myself a Wacom tablet so I can actually do some better scribbles instead of using my mouse. Just you wait, it's coming around the corner. Maybe I'll make this a little bit. The angle on that's probably. Yeah, we'll just use that for now. Need anything else? Just the horizon a little bit. Some trees. All right. See if this works. And what I'm going to need to do is also save the box region only because I don't want those reference lines I drew on the outside. So get my sketch there, delete that one, and got this one. Okay. Rudimentary sketch, mostly using this for demonstration purposes. Because we've got the depth kind of controlling some of the floor here in the perspective, we can also add in this regional guidance and control layer. This, put this in and make this a scribble. Not going to want to process that. I'm just going to do a scribble here. I'm going to bring the weight low. So 0.5, so it's got some flex on that sketch. And then I'm just going to add in a couple of things. And we'll say this is a wooded environment, a wooden shack, a fire pit, and forest. Empty, vibrant, detailed, blah, blah, blah. Then I'm going to use my regional guidance, and I'm just going to kind of nudge some things in the right way. So we've got our wooden shack. We've got our forest, wooded environment, and then we've got our fire pit. And I may have to fiddle around with some of this stuff. It's okay. Just to get it to do what I want it to do. But we're playing around here. We're having some fun. We're experimenting. Someone said we can all relate better with the less sophisticated input tools because that's what most of us have anyway. That's funny. Someone asked for paint-like shapes and line drawing tools and image to image or canvas. Understood. There's some cool stuff coming up ahead with the canvas, and we're going to give this a shot. We're going to see what we get. We'll see if we actually get what we want here. It's loading up all the control nets and passing that in. Might be a little bit painterly. Looking at this, it seems like it's going to be illustrative. Yeah, it's a little bit too painterly for me. But you can kind of get the idea, right? So we've got our wooded shack. We've got our wooded background. We've got the fire pit. Positioning is all there. Structure is mostly aligned. I don't know if it really fits our guy, but you kind of get the idea with how you can create these types of environments. Now, in this case, I don't like that this is a painterly illustration. I kind of want to make sure that this gets more photography influence. Photograph on 80 millimeter lens. Let me try with that. Yeah, somebody asked me, what would you do to get this to be a more filmy cinematic reel? There's two ways, really. One, I think, is going to be just prompting if you're using a general model. The other is I am using a general model. What you could do specifically is also use a model that's hyper trained on the type of assets you're looking to generate. So if you had a cinematic film model that was just trained on that content and really knew how to create that high fidelity type of output, that would be useful there as well. I'm just using a generic one. But we'll go in and see if we can get, with just the prompt, kind of pushing it towards the right style. Adding terms that are more like the style we want, taking out anything that might be confusing, and then putting in things that are definitely not the style we want, like painting and painterly. That's kind of what we got in that last one. We can see that this is a much more realistic image. We've got a nice, even a little bit of a depth of focus type blur on the background. And so this is like it's a really nice scene. It looks like he's got electricity. This Viking has electricity, and that is probably not real, or it's not, not accurate. We could probably fix that too, just by defining what a shack is. But in any case, I think the most important part here is that we've gotten the style that we're looking for, and we've got the general. We look at like the vibes we gave it. We've got the base structure of the floor. We've got the shack and where it's at. We've got the kind of like scene and where that's at. I would say that it's pretty accurately kind of like captured what we were looking to put in there. So it's good, right? This is, again, a very loose control. If we wanted really more specific control, we wanted the exact shape of the shack, we wanted a lot more details, you can certainly render all of that. You can draw it, you can put it in Blender or Maya, and you can kind of compose the scene and then pull it out of the generation process. That's part of the control here, is that you've got that ability to do that. And then if we find anything that we wanted to change in, in the process, we can do that on the canvas. Today, we don't offer the type of regional control and stuff that we're looking at with the control canvas, but in an upcoming canvas update, you'll have regional controls and the ability to work on the canvas with all of the tools we just used for our original generation. So stay tuned to that. That's going to be a really fun update and is actively in progress right now. The most important piece that we're working through is user experience. We're trying to make sure that this continues to be a really fluid tool for creative expression and kind of works with that artistic process of how am I conveying what I want, where I want it, how can I do that while I'm in painting, and how can I have that be a fluid piece of this. But a few comments that came in from chat. Wow, Scribble plus regional prompting really works. Yes, it does. I think regional control in general works a lot better when you give a little bit of structure, when you have something for that to attach to. If you're purely trying to use it as, I'm going to put in a prompt and I'm going to throw a blob and say, like, find out how this person fits in here, I think it's going to have a lot of it's going to have a harder time. But when you have control, whether that's a scribble or a depth, you can do a lot more with that. And it's very helpful. All right. So any other questions on what we've done here to create this kind of like original scene of ours? If we like this scene and we wanted to change some things, we could also pass this back in as our control for the depth, and do some more stuff with it. But we'll move on to our next one, because I think we're about half time right now. And so it might be good to get some other stuff here. Other question that came in, remind me of the GPU you are using on your setup and how much VRAM. This is using a 4090, which has 24 gigabytes of VRAM. This is an SDXL model, and so that's how multiple control nets, multiple IP adapters don't really cause much of an issue. If you're on a smaller GPU, you might have a little bit of a hard time using more controls and IP adapters at the same time. There are some optimizations that are in flight for helping with that, but honestly, the most important thing that you can really do is just either upgrade your GPU. VRAM is the thing that you really want to focus on. There are some really nice GPUs that are a little bit more affordable than a 4090 that still have a significant bump on the VRAM side. They may not be as quick on the generation piece, but VRAM is what allows you to do things capability-wise. The other option is you can find a hosting provider that has a GPU. Invoke.com, we host it. We have a number of professionals using us. The benefit of that is you get access to a really nice GPU. You use the interface. It has a whole bunch of other features, but you can use it from anywhere. You can use it from a laptop, use it wherever you're at. And so that's one of the benefits of that. But either way, you just want to make sure that you've got enough power to be able to do this type of control when you're working in a professional environment, because this control is really what's going to drive most of the creative capability of this tool in your production and in your professional workflow. So let's go on to our next example here. Maybe I'll leave some of these prompt terms because they might be helpful. But we're going to go to our assets here. I've got this picture of an alleyway. And, I think the thing that we're doing here is similar in some ways to what we just did on the last example. I'm going to hit this ruler icon and make sure that we're at the right size for this. So something that you'll notice that's interesting is this image has a reflection in it. And so that reflection in the depth map actually shows up as like a secondary world underneath, right? Which is kind of cool. Maybe we'll play around with that. There might be some like interesting creative exploration that goes on here that's maybe not on script. But the thing that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to take this structure, use it to effectively serve as the skeleton of our image, right? We're using the depth map. We might loosen up the weight. We might bring that down a little bit, but we really want to use that as like the raw structure of this scene. We like the fact that it has this reflection. The thing we're going for is we're looking to maybe turn this into a different type of image. And that's where we're going to use IP Adapter. So IP Adapter is your influence image. It's basically you pass in an image reference and say, hey, pull something out of this. Use it for its content, or use it for its style, or use it for its composition. In this case, we've got this like picture of mountains and, beautiful scenery. There's water in it. Really, the thing that I'm going for here is a lot of this kind of like nature and clean, pure nature. This isn't a post-apocalyptic scene. This is not grungy. This is kind of like high quality nature photography, just like really crisp. And everything seems kind of like clean and like you're at a natural park, right? Or natural park. So we're going to take that as our influence image, and we're going to use style only. And we are going to maybe pull that down to about 0.55, and we can play around with that and see what we get from an influence perspective. But when we come back, we're going to kind of see it's going to adhere to this the structure that we've put on it. So we're going to say a city overrun by nature, lots of greenery, concrete jungle. I am funny, I assure you. And then we're going to generate that. We're going to see what we get. What I'm hoping for is kind of like, I Am Legend. It's like going through the city. It's definitely like, a city, but it's got a lot of greenery. There's a lot of like beautiful stuff there. I think this might be giving us what we want here. It's a little bit blurry. It's okay. We can fiddle with that. But I think broadly speaking, if we look at our comparison image, we can see where the structure came from. The reflection is cool. Somebody says, yes, that it is. And you're going to get that reflection because of the depth map. The depth map has that reflection. It is imposing the reflection on the output, which is cool. So if you've got a reflection in your depth map, it'll actually carry over here, which is neat. I think generally speaking, we get a little bit of the mountains in the background. We get this like nature stuff, and overall, we get some really interesting aesthetics layered on top of this in a pretty cool way. Let's do a couple things. Let's see what happens when we bring the style up to 1. Don't know what's going to happen. I just am curious, and I want to see if it like changes anything. We'll get out of comparison mode here. Then we can compare these two. Maybe like it's got a little bit more nature in it. Ooh, it's crisper. Get that. So when it's higher, it's turned these garbage bins into like concrete blocks, but I kind of like it. It's cool. And it also turned this building into a piece of marble, which is also interesting. I guess it took the mountain very literally and made it a like a marble building. So that's that's pretty cool. There's definitely some things I like about it. Some things that are a little bit weird, but one thing that's pretty interesting is that it took this kind of like very crisp photography that was in the shot of the mountain, and it kind of like imbued that into this image as well, which is pretty cool. And I think we get a nice result out of it. Let's see what happens when we bring down the structure a little bit. So we're going to decrease, we're going to do it 2 ways because I think it's fun to play around with this. We'll say first one that we're going to generate has a lower weight, but runs for the entire duration that we've kind of set. Maybe we'll even, because it's such a low weight, we'll let it run the entire time. And then we'll flip that. We'll have a high strength and then stop very early on and see what we get there. So this one's low weight running the entire time. We're going to turn the weight up, maybe about 0.9, and we'll run it for that first like 25%. And then we'll compare these two because I think they will have pretty significant differences. Both of these do have this like high strength IP adapter, which I think is cool. Oh, that's really an interesting image. There's some cool stuff going on here. So this one is low at the very beginning. We have high strength, but we stop it at about 25%. So compared to the structure of our original image, we'll use this one as a rough approximation. This was a lot closer. You can see that some structural elements are gone. So these garbage bins that were interpreted as blocks are now gone. They've been replaced by trees. Generally speaking, the reflection, the pool is mostly in the same spot. There's a little bit of shifting as the image was produced, but overall, those are mostly the same. Some key differences here that because we gave up on that structure early, there's a little bit more detail that's come out on this building over here. And this mountain has even kind of like, it's interesting as this building has become a mountain at the top, right? So that structure loosening kind of flexed that up a little bit. It's pretty cool. It looks cool. Definitely looks kind of like dreamlike, almost maybe Inception. You're in a city that's got some hallucinatory bits in it, but it's pretty cool. this is the image that we had that had a low strength, so 0.35, but ran the entire time. And if we're comparing this with our original, you can see that having that structure run the entire time, even if it's loose, creates like entities in certain places. So like this isn't a garbage can. It's not structured the same way as the garbage can, but there's something there, right? And there's something here. Versus when we compare to this image, those just kind of like bleed away and be kind of blend into the background because the structure is completely gone during those last steps and the details kind of get fleshed out elsewhere. So this is like an interesting way to understand how this works. I mean, if you look at the buildings over here, this building doesn't have that mountaintop. This building over here on the right still has the same structure. Because the weight is lower, seems like it's actually given it the flexibility to turn that into a glass building, which is kind of cool. We've lost some perspective on this side with this kind of near-term foreground edge of the alleyway. And so now this is just a literal wall that goes into nothing. But both of these are really cool in different ways. If we go to this other image and kind of compare these two, with the structure removed, you can see that there are a lot of interesting elements that have been added in that weren't in the original. So this one was the very low percentage on the end step. So this didn't have the control for the entire duration. And you'll see that down here on the bottom, we've got this like introduction of some additional elements into the scene. And that is missing from every single other one that had the, well, actually, let's see here. This is the one that had high strength for the lower piece. And so that structure was enforced early on. Yeah, so the strength was enforced early on, which meant that there's nothing here on this, but water. And so that kind of was given some flexibility. What's interesting to me, though, is that if I recall correctly, let's just remix our image here to get those settings back. This one was 0.35 and ran for the entire time. And so it's actually interesting because if we look at the depth map, you can see that there's some structure here. There's something that's kind of visible there. What I'm getting out of this is that because the image generated without a building to have a reflection, and this is kind of an interesting technique, or I wouldn't even say technique. This is an interesting occurrence with diffusion models, is it's trying to make sense of this. And so because there can't be a reflection here of a building, because there is no building here, it's introduced this like this element because there was structure in there that it was injecting. So it introduced this in, but you still see the reflection of that wall there on the bottom. So you can see there's some interesting kind of occurrences here, and where and how you inject control into the imagery is really going to influence a lot of the output. We still have some time. And so I think now, unless we got any like questions from the folks in the audience who are maybe in the industry or have some like other control questions, I may just play around with this reflection a little bit and see if we can get some interesting stuff from it, because I think it could be an interesting way to get some control. I have some ideas to play around with it. We're gonna see. So I'll keep an eye out for questions, and if anything comes up, we'll play with those questions. But in the meantime, what I want to do is try something else. So I'm going to delete this real quick. I'm going to give myself a reference image. I want like a city that has been overrun by fire, post-apocalyptic, industrial grunge, rust, red tint, hellscape, cinematic film still, 80mm lens, and dynamic lighting. Also, award-winning cinematography, right? That's all that we want. So we're going to try that. I don't have any controls in place. I'm just purely getting this as a reference image. I'm trying to get a certain aesthetic. Random seed doesn't matter. I could use a random seed, but it doesn't matter here. Mostly just looking to get this. That's what I wanted. I wanted that. Truly rough place that you wouldn't want to be. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our image here. And now that we've got those controls back, I had this kind of like idea. I'm going to take away our global IP adapter, and I'm going to use regional IP adapter. So with regional guidance, by default, you're just using a prompt. Actually, delete the prompt out. When you delete the prompt out, you can do negative prompt with region control, positive prompt with regional control. The thing I'm going to do right now is IP adapter with regional control. This is going to be interesting. So what I want to do is I want to have this style of this kind of like, hellscape, but I only want to apply it right down here on the bottom in the reflection. Pretty cool, right? Pretty cool idea. Wow, so creative. So we got that down in the bottom. And then I'm going to add another regional layer, and I'm going to do an IP adapter with this nice, pleasant scenery. Maybe I'll even just use one of the other ones that we have here, just because it's more convenient. Put these at both at 0.6, but I'm going to make this nice, pleasant one. Maybe I'll pick blue here so I can see these regions a little bit easier. Up top. Okay. So now I'm going to say a reflection showing contrast between a nature utopia and a fiery reflection. No, I'll just take this out. Fiery reflection of the city. Okay. Maybe I'll add in some positive prompt here for this. We'll say nature utopia. And take the auto negative off. And then, so somebody's asking me, why did I take off auto negative? Because I could leave it on. We could try it with both. We'll see if we like one or the other. What I have found is that auto negative can sometimes, if I don't really want to limit the boundaries of the prompt, it can have a weird effect on the other areas. So in this case, it's probably fine. But effectively, when we've talked about this before, when you're using regional guidance and you have auto negative on, the area that you have prompted for, so in this case, fiery reflection of the city with this picture right here for style, the negative of that, so basically fiery reflection in the negative prompt, the picture of the imagery kind of as a negative, would be applied to this region outside, which in this case might be okay because they're pretty distinct styles and we actually don't want a whole lot of overlap. But sometimes it can cause just this weird, like, it can create an image that kind of looks like you've mixed water and oil where the coherence doesn't really fit because you've kind of like pulled apart these concepts in such a way that there's a natural seam. And that's not really what we're going for. We want it to kind of like blend together. So we'll see what happens. We'll leave this as is. It's probably not going to have too big of an influence on this specific composition, but we'll test it out with both. So we do have a fixed seed, and so this will be a comparison that's pretty useful. So we'll generate this. First, I just want to see if it actually picks up what we're going for, because before we do any comparisons, that's kind of the most important piece. Cross our fingers. Okay. I get it generally. Right, we've got the reflection. There's definitely some element of that in the reflection. We've got the nice scene up top. Maybe we want to loosen this up a little bit. So we'll pull that down to 0.4 and then bring the end step back up. So this is kind of the more general structure up front. but then loosen up for the details, and only because I want to give it a little bit more freedom on this so that it doesn't look as, it kind of looks a little bit over controlled in my opinion. So we'll do that, and then we'll add the auto negative to see how that influences the generation. Good questions though. Good questions. We like that. Okay. I can see it. I can see it. It's a little bit more like sunset on the bottom than I really like. So let's see, a post-apocalyptic. A post-apocalyptic city. Maybe I'm even going to go full. Let's see if that does. And then once I get the right aesthetic, then we'll try the auto negative. I'm just trying to like tweak and poke and prod here. You have a feeling turning that to full injected the image in. And so now it's kind of like two images. So we can't really use full if we're trying to get a reflection of something. You're going to have to do style. But maybe I'll pull this up to 0.85 and I'll change it to the plus IP adapter and see if that helps. Because it could. And just as a reminder, when you're using the full IP adapter, what you're putting in is you're putting in the content itself. And so it's basically like I'm looking at a picture that's upright of the city. And so it kind of injected that in. The plus IP adapter, though, does have like this interesting element. I still think there's probably like a debate whether we're looking at a post-apocalyptic reflection or if it's just muddy water, especially if you're in Georgia, you get this kind of like red clay. That's kind of what it reminds me of. But we're going to try auto negative and see what we get here. Try that out. See if we like that. Muddy water and a trash can on fire just outside of you. Yeah. Sounds like, I'm just joking. It doesn't sound like Georgia. But the red clay does. Red clay does. Someone said I'm bringing back childhood memories of red clay. That's right. So when we did auto negative, like I said, it's not truly that big of a difference here. There's a little bit of a difference, but it's not insane. But, you know, some good exploration and playing around with the ideas. This is where I'd probably go into the canvas and make some more tweaks. I think we got a general, let me see if I can just upweight these pieces here and see if we get a little bit more. Let's turn auto negative off just because I don't think it did a whole lot anyways in this specific composition. I like the one before better. So what I'm really trying to do is just amp up how distinct the reflections look and get a little bit more of that, you know, post-apocalyptic vibe. Still not getting it. Everything here still looks kind of like the same. And I don't know if this is, yeah, someone's calling this out because this is what I'm noticing as well. In this experimentation, I think what I would hope for is more of a distinct reflection in the base, but what we're actually getting is an actual reflection of what's up on top, because the diffusion model is trying to make this a literal reflection, right? And so let's hypothesize how I might, because somebody's calling this out. What it's trying to do is it's trying to apply the style, but still maintain that this is the same reality. This is the same image. And what we're trying to do is show an alternative reality. Like this is the multiverse. We're seeing the alternative world. It doesn't really understand that concept with what I've given it. So if I wanted to do this, like if I were at a studio and this was like a critical part of like work that we were doing, if we wanted to kind of like create this easy ability to create this dynamic, what I'd want to do is I'd want to train a LoRa probably on this notion of like alternative realities and reflections, and like basically create this pattern where I can have something that looks one way and a reflection of that that is structurally similar but different in the other. And then I would have a trigger word I could use. I'd be able to kind of like really inject that concept into the model, and I'd be able to more easily go through this type of pipeline and workflow. And I think that is one way to really understand how, when you're working on creative projects using these tools, the model itself is actually a part of the tooling. It's part of your toolkit in injecting what you're trying to convey. And so in this case, what tools do we need to create the shot? We need the ability to kind of inject this concept of alternative realities and reflections. And maybe that's what we need to focus on having available for that pipeline so that we can repeatedly do that type of technique when we're going through these types of shots. Now, that's a little bit niche and specific, but generally that applies to any type of creative challenge when you're using this. Think of the LoRa's as a way to inject this type of targeted creative structure into the generation process so that it understands relationships and understands how to like stitch those together. We got a couple questions. Would you need to photo bash a training set? That's one way to create it, right? So you could photo bash a training set of this type of concept. The reality is like, how would you achieve that without AI, right? You would composite scene A and scene B together, and that's how you would achieve the effect. Well, to train a model, you show it that effect successfully applied on a couple of different generations, and that's going to give you the ability to invoke for that, right? So yes, the answer is you could photo bash it. You could, find any examples of that. You could create it in Photoshop. You could draw paintings of it, like anything where you're able to create this notion of a reflection of an alternative reality. You'd be able to convey reflections operate a little bit differently when I have this type of trigger word applied, and it can kind of understand that semantic content. So semantic content more easily. Someone said art frequently tries to do stuff that isn't what you would expect. AI has a problem with that. I think that is true. And that's where the human comes in, right? Is we're trying to break convention. We're trying to force it to do something that we want it to do. And we need to understand how to get it to do what we want it to do. It is a tool. It is not going to just produce everything perfectly. Someone gave a alternative prompt they want to try, which we will do. And they said not morose, although I don't think that's the right or the wrong term. So, maroon. Reflection in the water of post-apocalyptic maroon. Okay. They wanted to try this one, so we'll give it a try. I don't think it's going to change anything. I think this it's a raw challenge with the reflection concept and doing something that's like very different. Now, what we could do, just problem solving here, creative problem solving. We've got 5 minutes. We could take this depth map into the canvas. So it still looks like red clay, muddy water. It's not truly a post-apocalyptic. I think this one's probably the best base for it. We're going to save out our depth map. So we're going to click the save button here on, if you go down to the depth map over here, click that save. And where is it in our images? Doesn't want to save that for me. Does not want to save that for me. It's okay. We can do this. We go into the canvas. Into canvas. We'll pass that in as our ControlNet over here. Just have it create another depth map for us. Yeah, this is what somebody suggested, which is I'm already trying. we are going to pass this in, but we're going to do Inpainting, and we're going to focus on a reflection in the water of Post-Apocalyptic. And we're really going to focus primarily on the piece down here on the bottom. Let it reimagine this more flexibly. Leave this up. We'll turn random seed on. And we're just going to have this kind of inpaint the bottom part where the reflection is, really jamming in that prompt. And because the existing image is fixed, what I'm hopeful of is that we will get a much stronger effect here because we're kind of compositing two things together. Still kind of just tinted it. I think the maroon piece might be an element here, but let's also just do this. Let's do an IP adapter with this as our style. And I'm going to give that a shot. Took maroon out because I think it made it a little bit more like a Maroon 5 album cover. Oh yeah, there we go. That's right. That's the right color once we have that style in there. It's still a little bit more like a sunset in the base. We might need to loosen up our strength here just a little bit. Try that out. Someone said they can hear their 2080 crying just looking at my controllers. Yeah, it's definitely when you really want a lot of control, you can really get pretty hairy there with the controllers. Someone said try sunset as a negative prompt. I think that's fair. We'll try that. But ultimately, I think this goes back to the raw reflection concept is really, really pushing it to keep it the same in the image. Now, I've got, oh, there was a good one in there. Where was that? Oh, this one's good. Boom. That one's a little bit better. We like that. It looks a little bit more destroyed, a little bit more worn down. Probably some debate about how we would execute that if we really wanted to make it perfect, but overall, I think we're in a good spot. So that'll be it for today. Hopefully you all learned some fun stuff and some fun techniques for compositing, and we'll do it again next week. Take care until then. See ya.